Story 1. He left no fingerprints, but rearranged my furniture while I slept. This happened to me in 2019 in a studio apartment I had just moved into after a bad breakup. I was living in Portland at the time, in a building that felt more like a converted motel than an apartment complex. One of those single hallway, low-rent units where every door faces the parking lot. I'd always lived with roommates before. This was the first time I'd ever been completely alone. The place wasn't much. A kitchenette, a futon, a small table, and one of those old radiator heaters that hissed every few hours. I kept it simple. I worked nights at a 24-hour diner and usually got home around 3 a.m., cooked something quick, and fell asleep just after sunrise. The first week passed without anything strange, but on the 8th morning, something was different. I'd left a bowl and spoon on the table the night before. When I woke up, the spoon was gone. The bowl was still there, but it had been moved about a foot to the left, perfectly centered on the table, as if someone had adjusted it for symmetry. I checked the sink, the counter, even the trash. No spoon. It felt small enough to dismiss. Maybe I'd forgotten and moved it half asleep. I was overtired all the time. I didn't want to make it into something it wasn't. But over the next few nights, little things kept changing. My keys, which I always placed on the wall hook by the door, were suddenly on the kitchen counter when I got home. The bathroom rug, which I never touched, was rotated 90 degrees. My shampoo bottle was upside down in the shower, as if someone had stood it that way deliberately. It never felt like a break-in. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken. The door was always locked. The windows, too. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. Then came the chair. I had a single wooden chair that sat tucked beneath the fold-up table in the corner of the room. One morning, I woke up and the chair was facing the front door. Not just moved, turned at a perfect angle, about 10 feet from where it normally sat, as if someone had sat there during the night, watching the door, or waiting. I stood completely still, barefoot on the cold laminate floor, and stared at that chair for a full minute. My hands started to sweat. I hadn't sleepwalked in years, and even then, never like this. The idea that someone had been inside the room, not to rob me, not to hurt me, but just to shift things, started to take root in my brain like mold. It wasn't the violation that scared me most. It was the intention. Whoever it was didn't want me to know for sure. They were testing my perception, seeing what I'd notice, how long it would take me to doubt myself. I bought a cheap motion sensor, set it up near the door. The light never triggered, but the next morning my table had been turned a full inch to the left. I only knew because I'd started taping the feet to the floor with thin strips of masking tape. Every night before going to bed, I would line them up. Just to check, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Each time it was the same, a few inches off, never dramatic, always subtle, enough that I might question my own memory. I started staying awake, watching from bed. But every night my exhaustion won, and every morning something new had shifted. A drawer opened by an inch, a mug facing the opposite direction, the power strip unplugged from the wall, and no signs of entry, no broken locks, no forced windows, just quiet changes, calculated, intimate. It wasn't until the photo frame moved that I started to cry. It was a cheap frame, holding an old photo of my mom and me from Christmas years ago. It always sat beside my bed. When I woke up one morning, it was on the floor, not broken, just face down, as if someone had looked at it, held it, and then gently set it down. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. The traps started as a way to prove I wasn't crazy. I went to the hardware store and bought a few small things, clear fishing wire, flour, a second-hand webcam. That night, I tied the wire across the front door, low enough that anyone opening it would snap it. I dusted the floor in front of the window with a light coat of flour, and I set up the webcam across the room, facing the bed and the door. I didn't sleep that night, just lay under the covers, watching the red recording light blink. Nothing happened. When I checked in the morning, the fishing line was still intact, the flower undisturbed, no alerts on the camera. I scrolled through the footage twice. I hadn't moved. The room hadn't changed. But the chair, the one I had dragged back to the table, was turned again. Not all the way, just slightly angled toward the center of the room. Like someone had sat down, gotten up and left. The camera didn't catch it. I checked the timestamp. It had frozen between 3:12 and 3:14 a.m. No glitch warning, just 2 full minutes skipped. I reset the system, changed the batteries, replaced the memory card. The next night, I scattered marbles on the floor between the window and the bed, put my phone on voice record, even pressed flour into the outside doorknob to check for fingerprints. At sunrise, I woke up to silence. The marbles were still in place. The phone had recorded nothing but faint white noise. The flour on the doorknob had been gently brushed off, like someone had noticed it and wiped it away with the flat of a hand. I opened the fridge to get some water. There was a note inside, taped to the back wall, just above the lettuce drawer. Lined notebook paper, written in small, even handwriting. You think in straight lines? We don't. No signature, no fingerprints, no sign of how it got there. I sat on the floor, shaking. Not from fear, exactly, but from the recognition that whoever was doing this didn't want to scare me. Not overtly. They wanted me to question how I processed reality. It wasn't an intruder in the traditional sense. It was someone methodical, precise. Someone who knew I lived alone, knew my schedule, knew where to look and where not to be seen. I called the police again. They sent someone out. I showed him the note, the camera footage, the wiped knob. He told me there was no evidence of forced entry, that I might want to speak to someone, a therapist maybe, in case I was under stress. Sometimes the brain plays tricks on us. He said it kindly, but I could see it in his face. He didn't believe me. No one did. I found a forum thread one night titled "Psychological Intrusions." It was buried deep in a site for survivors of stalking. Most of the comments were what you'd expect, stories of people being followed, tracked, watched. But one user posted something that stopped me cold. They described it as intimate disarrangement, not theft, not vandalism, just adjustment. Drawers left ajar by a centimeter, shoes lined up backward, objects reversed or flipped, always quiet, always clean. The purpose wasn't to take anything, it was to rewrite familiarity, to change the meaning of space until the person no longer recognized their own home. One user said he moved my alarm clock by exactly 6 inches every night. I didn't even notice at first, but over time, I started waking up not knowing where I was. Another wrote, "The toothbrush wasn't mine, I knew it wasn't, but it was in my cup, next to my real one." For weeks, I read for hours. None of them had caught the person. None had proof. The phrase that haunted me the most was from a psychologist. Someone had quoted, "Spatial trust is foundational. If you can't trust your surroundings, you can't trust your perception. And if you can't trust your perception, you begin to lose your sense of self." That's what they were doing to me, not breaking in to rob or hurt, but to imprint, to layer themselves into the layout of my life. By the 3rd week, I couldn't tell if I had left the blinds open or not. Couldn't remember which direction the soap dish had always faced. Couldn't be sure the mug in the sink was mine. I stopped inviting anyone over, stopped talking about it at work, stopped sleeping for more than an hour at a time. The worst part, I never heard them, never saw a shadow, never caught a sound or shape or breath, but the shifts kept happening, and eventually they stopped. No message, no closure, no goodbye. Just a final morning where everything was exactly where I'd left it. It's been a year now. Sometimes I still wake up expecting the chair to be turned. Sometimes I leave it that way, just to see how it feels. Story 2. Every time I reported him, he wasn't in any system. This started in the fall of 2022, when I transferred to a new branch of the logistics firm I'd worked at for years. I had taken the job to get out of a bad apartment situation in Miami. Nothing supernatural, just mold. a landlord who ghosted me, and a neighbor who screamed at 3 a.m. because his microwave made a clicking noise. The new branch was in Raleigh, clean, suburban, quiet. I worked in HR. Long, quiet hours in a corner office with frosted glass, spreadsheets, and employee intake forms. The job was forgettable in the best way. And the office had that bland, neutral energy, the kind of place where no one locked their desks because nothing personal was ever left behind. 3 weeks into the job, I started noticing him. At first, I thought he was just new. Maybe someone from another department or a contractor. He didn't talk to anyone, just walked past my office window every few days. Same time, always around 4:30 p.m. when people were wrapping up and lights were going out. He wore a grey zip-up jacket, light jeans, black sneakers. But what stood out was the way he walked, stiff, deliberate, like every motion was slightly off rhythm. His arms didn't swing, his chin tilted too far forward. He walked like someone mimicking human movement, but forgetting certain details. The first time I really noticed was after our office coffee machine was replaced. I had gone into the shared break room and caught a glimpse of someone standing near the microwave. I stepped around the corner, but it was empty. No one there, nothing on the counter but a box of green tea and 2 unused mugs. Still, I could feel it, that static pressure in the air, like someone had just been there. Later that week, I tried to take a picture. It was a Thursday, same time. I saw him again through the glass. I stood slowly, quietly, and raised my phone, clicked the shutter. But when I looked at the photo, there was nothing. Just the hallway, the carpet, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the exit sign. No figure, no movement, no blur. I didn't delete it. I sent it to my co-worker, Lana, who sat at the opposite end of the floor. All I said was, "Do you see anyone?" A few minutes later, she messaged back, "Not in the pic, but wait, the guy in the grey jacket." I froze. "What guy?" Lana replied, "He's always walking past around 4:30, really straight posture, doesn't talk. I thought he was one of your team." I called her. "He's not on any team," I said. "What do you mean?" I opened our internal employee database. We log everyone, full-time, temp, even custodial and contracted IT staff. It's how we manage access cards and shifts. I ran every filter I could think of, searched by clothing description, cross-checked the building badge logs. Nothing, not a single entry matched the time he entered, no camera hits, no sign-in. I showed Lana the photo. She looked confused. "He's not in it," she said. "No," I told her, "he never is." Then she said something that stuck with me ever since. "He looks like he's printed wrong." I stopped trying to confront him after that. Instead, I started logging every time I saw him. I wrote it in a notepad file on my desktop, always around the same time, always the same side of the building. Then I started noticing something else. He never looked directly at me, not once. But I started seeing him in reflections, in the window near the water cooler. I'd glance and see his shoulder pass by behind mine. I'd spin around. The hall would be empty. In the microwave door, the glass panel near the elevator, never in front of me. Always caught in a surface. The worst was the mirror in the ground floor lobby restroom. I'd gone in to wash my hands before heading out. The mirror is big, stretches across the entire wall above the sinks. As I leaned down to rinse my hands, I caught movement behind me. I stood slowly, blinking at the mirror. There he was, standing behind me at the back wall of the restroom. But the room was empty. I could feel it. I didn't need to turn around to know. He wasn't really there. Just in the glass, a pale figure in a grey jacket, face slightly too narrow, eyes not quite aligned. I turned. Nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, he was gone. I left work early that day, told my manager I was getting a migraine. I couldn't focus. My body felt electric, not like fear, more like warning. That weekend, I visited my sister in Atlanta. We hadn't seen each other in months, and I thought a few days away would help. She works from home. HR like me, but for a different company. On Saturday night, I was sitting on her couch when I glanced over at her laptop. She was in a Zoom meeting with a co-worker from out of state, a weekend planning session she'd forgotten about. I wasn't paying much attention until I saw the reflection in her co-worker's window. It was raining where he was. He lived in Pennsylvania, and in the reflection behind him, just for a second, I saw a figure walk past. A man, grey jacket, same walk, same angle of his head. I stood up and pointed. "Pause it," I said. "What?" "Go back. 30 seconds. She scrubbed the timeline, froze the video, and there he was, faint, blurred by the rain-streaked glass. My sister squinted. "That your guy?" I nodded. She looked at me. "That was taken in Philly," she said. "You think he's there too?" "No," I said. "I don't think he's anywhere." I started making police reports after that. 3 total. The first one was dismissed as a workplace concern. They advised me to notify building security and log any future encounters. I asked them to review the CCTV footage for the floor at the time I gave them. They told me the cameras had malfunctioned that day. The second time, I brought printed screenshots. I showed them the Zoom freeze frame. I explained what had been happening. They were polite, said they'd file the report. 3 days later, I called to follow up. They had no record of my visit. I gave them the name of the officer I spoke to. "There's no one by that name in this precinct," the woman said. I went back to the station, took the third report in person, got a paper copy this time. It was stamped, signed, dated. I scanned it, printed it again, kept the original in a safe at home. 2 weeks later, my office got a call. HR records flagged my file due to unsubstantiated contact with law enforcement. I pulled out my copy and brought it to work. Our office printer wouldn't scan it. It made this high-pitched error tone. Over and over. When I finally brought it to IT, they looked confused. "This stamp's wrong," the technician said. "That's not a department number. That's not even a real precinct code." I checked again. There was a number I hadn't seen before. 6 digits. Not in any format I recognized. It wasn't my employee number, not my badge ID, not a case code. I looked it up anyway. Google returned one hit, an archived forum post on a site I'd never heard of. The title of the thread, "When You Can't Name Them, But They Know Yours." The original poster had written about a man they saw in different cities, in reflections, in windows, in freeze frames. They described trying to report him, but being told their claims were impossible. No record, no matching image, no trace. They wrote, "He was outside my window again last night. I yelled his name in my sleep. I've never said it aloud while awake." I reread that part 3 times. Because the name they wrote, the one I've seen in my dreams, over and over since this started, was the same name that appeared faintly on the bottom of my paper report, typed in all caps, misaligned slightly, as if the typewriter had jammed. Marlon Thurn, a name I've never spoken, a name that doesn't exist in any system. But when I dream, he's always waiting. And when I wake up, I always feel like I've just missed something, like a door closed a second before I open my eyes. And the air is colder than it should be. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. Someone was breaking into my house, but leaving things behind. This started when I moved into a small house on the edge of town in late 2020. It was an old foreclosure I'd gotten for cheap after taking a remote coding job that let me leave the city. I was 33 at the time. No roommates, no pets. Just me, a leased hatchback, and a slowly furnished 2-bedroom house on a quiet street where most of the neighbors were older and kept to themselves. The house was bare at first. I had a mattress on the floor, a folding table for a desk, and a few boxes of kitchenware. I liked the emptiness. It made things feel temporary, like I could leave any time. It started with the coffee mug. It was plain white, no logo, no chips. I found it drying on the rack one morning, sitting between my usual black mug and a soup bowl, but I hadn't used it. I didn't even own a plain white mug. I thought maybe I'd picked it up from the thrift store without noticing. I left it alone. A week later, I noticed a new towel in the bathroom. Grey, thicker than mine. hung neatly over the rack. Then a toothbrush, not mine, different brand, slightly used, still in the holder, next to mine. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. I kept the bathroom door open at night. There was only one entrance into the house, and the deadbolt was always locked. The windows had latches. Nothing had ever been disturbed. I lived alone. I threw the toothbrush out. The next morning it was back. Same one, sitting in the holder. This time I knew I hadn't missed it. I'd put it in the outside bin, under other trash. I started checking the locks twice a night, but nothing was broken, nothing forced, nothing taken. It was all additions. Small things at first, a pair of socks in my laundry that didn't belong to me, a new bar of soap, slightly used, beside my own, a half-eaten granola bar in the trash I hadn't bought. The strangest part was how these items blended in, like they belonged, like someone was staging the house to look lived in, just not by me alone. I'd find 2 forks in the drying rack even though I always reused the same one. 2 towels on the rack, mine damp, the other freshly hung. I stopped inviting anyone over. I didn't want to explain. I wasn't even sure what I'd say. I bought a door camera. It never triggered. But one night, I woke up at 3:48 a.m. to the sound of the kettle whistling. I don't even own a kettle. When I walked into the kitchen, there was nothing on the stove, but the burner was warm, and a ceramic kettle sat neatly on the back corner, clean, dry, and unfamiliar. I started to feel like the house was being slowly overwritten, not broken into, claimed. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to blend in, to become. I started leaving traps, not obvious ones, just markers. I'd place items at exact angles, note how I left my shoes, record timestamps on sticky notes. I took photos before going to bed. Each night I tried to catch a difference. Most nights it was the same, but not always. Once, the sponge was moved, just slightly, not where I'd left it. I checked the photos. It had shifted 2 inches left. Another night, my blanket had a crease I couldn't explain, like someone had lain beside me and gotten up without me noticing. But the worst was the breakfast. It was a Sunday. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. coding, passed out on the couch. When I woke up, I was still on the couch, wrapped in my throw blanket. The sun was already up, and on the table were 2 plates. Toast, eggs, bacon, still warm. 1 plate, half-eaten, the other untouched, but set with silverware and a glass of orange juice. The chair on the far side of the table had been pulled out. I walked slowly around the room. The windows were locked, the door dead-bolted, no sign of a break-in. I picked up the fork from the eaten plate. It was wet. Whoever had eaten had done it recently. I called the police. They arrived in 15 minutes, took statements, walked through the house. No forced entry, no signs of damage, nothing stolen. I showed them the plate, the setup. One of the officers frowned and said, "There's no crime in cooking." I didn't respond. He was right technically, but he didn't have to sleep there. They left without filing a report, just told me to install better locks. I changed them the next day. It didn't matter. That night, when I checked the table again before bed, both plates were gone. I hadn't touched them. No crumbs, no utensils, no glass, just a napkin left neatly folded in the center of the table. It had a word written in ballpoint pen. Enough! I stopped sleeping regularly. I started researching instead. Obsession crept in the way it always does, gradually, disguised as curiosity. There were threads, obscure message boards. A term kept surfacing, reversal stalkers. Not common, not studied deeply, but the idea was always the same. Individuals who don't threaten or chase, they replicate. They imitate the routines of their fixation until the boundary between self and other collapses. One post described finding a second alarm clock beside their bed, identical to the first. Another mentioned receiving mail addressed to their name, but written in handwriting they didn't recognize. I kept scrolling. I started journaling everything. Photos, notes, item placements. Then one day I opened the drawer of my bedside table and found a notebook I hadn't put there. It was black, leather-bound, No label. Inside, neat handwriting. First page dated 3 months earlier. I started reading. It was a diary written in the first person, but it wasn't mine. The entries described my routines in exact detail, my job, my schedule, even the way I organized my sock drawer. But then it began describing things I hadn't done yet. Decided to skip the shower tonight, too tired, will clean the sink tomorrow. I flipped ahead. The next night, I had skipped the shower, not planned, just laziness. Another page. Didn't notice the new towel. Might change the scent next time. Subtle lavender. I flipped faster. The entries continued, each one mimicking my thoughts, my actions, sometimes slightly off, sometimes exact. Then, near the end, the dates stopped aligning. The final entry was dated 1 week in the future. It said, "You will remember we were the same." That line repeated, "You will remember we were the same," over and over, 20 times. The final page was blank, except for a faint circle drawn in the center with a dot inside it. I started hearing the kettle again that week. Always at 3:48 a.m., always warm, never boiling. I stopped checking after a while. I'd just lie in bed watching the ceiling, listening. Sometimes I'd wake up and feel the indent beside me, like someone had lain there and left before I noticed. And sometimes, just for a second, I'd catch a reflection in the darkened TV screen, a shape sitting at the table, eating, waiting. I don't live there anymore, but I still dream of the house. And when I do, I'm never alone. There's always someone just out of frame, doing what I do, wearing what I wear, living just behind the glass.